Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Monday, February the 12th, Staffordshire Police Fire and Crime Panel. Today we'll be focusing on the fire service. The Commissioner and his team are here today to help us through this piece of work. So if we could look at the agenda, please. Item 1, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Elson, Councillor Lowrun, who sent her substitute Councillor Barron in her place, and Councillor Maycock.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Are there any? No. Decisions published by the Commissioner, none taken, none to report. Questions to the Commissioner from members of the public? We have none. So item 5 on the agenda, proposed fire and rescue budget and the precept for 2024-25. Over to you, Commissioner, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to the panel. Chairman, I'm just going to jump straight to Appendix 7 on page 24 of your papers. Because no doubt, as I do, you and your eagle-eyed panel members have gone straight to the MTFS to look what the Fire and Rescue Service is prepared or preparing or feels it needs to do in terms of transformation to get through the next few years. And you'll see there, and probably uniquely in the country, that I'm about to present a budget to you where the Fire and Rescue Service for Staffordshire is in an extremely healthy place. There is not the need for additional transformation savings at this moment. And I'm absolutely delighted to be in a position to do that because I know just how much the public in Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent value their fire and rescue service. They want it to be secure. They want their fire stations open, whether they're in the towns or the countryside. They want a good complement of whole-time and on-call firefighters. And they want them to have the equipment and the kit and the technology and the support that they need to do a good job. So, a balanced budget for fire for the next 4 or 5 years. You'll see there that the budget for the first time is over £50 million. There has been some considerable increases this year, mostly related to pay, also related to pensions. I've talked before about pensions. I'm absolutely comfortable with emergency services and others receiving fair pensions. My own view is that this is a problem nationally. The scale of public sector pensions is going to be an issue for all of us down the line, I'm afraid. However, the increases there are funded. The increases in the pay are mostly funded. And the council taxpayer, I'm asking them to, for an increase, again, below inflation, this time 2.99%, which equates to £2.52 a year if you're in a Band D property. That's extra. And that will be contributing to improved estate, maintaining our stations, improved equipment, appliances. You'll see in the capital programme there's reference to new vehicles, typical fire engines, £400,000 now. So this is big, big money, but essential to keep us all safe. This balanced position is thanks not just to the extremely diligent work of the service. They've found savings of 1.3 million in the last year or so, delivered 1.1 million of that, but also because we had a last-minute additional grant as a result of Michael Gove's decision to support local government and fire services with an extra £500 million quite late in the process. Actually, we only found out about that about 3 weeks ago. So that's really supported local authorities, and as many of them are in control still of fire services, Staffordshire's benefited by over £1 million from that grant. It's a one-off grant, very, very welcome, and that has allowed us to balance at this point. Now, that's all the positive. What I would like to just make sure that the panel are aware of is the uncertainty going forward. We've got a number of one-year settlements and a number of challenges, particularly, I think, a service that is looking in detail now how it can be more sustainable, how it can take advantage of electric vehicles. We're determined to keep our firefighters safe. There's a programme called Clean Cab at the moment. It's a concept being worked up nationally to make sure that contaminants are not being carried back from incidents into the vehicles and leading to firefighters suffering health issues later in life as a result of that. And we want to be at the forefront of that work. But I also think we're entering into a period, as I said, at our peace budget over the next few years of some uncertainty. We've got an international picture that is very concerning. And this budget, I think, puts us in as good a position as possible to be ready to face the future financially, as well as being ready to face the future operationally. Thank you to David and the team at the Fire and Rescue Service who look after the finances, and thanks to everybody working in the organisation, because they remain incredibly committed, and I think we've got some terrific leadership there now which has helped us to reach this position. As I said, we're continuing to invest, continuing to look to the future. I think we're in a good position to take the knocks as they come, and I'm very pleased to ask David, with your permission, just to take you and your colleagues through the details, if that's okay.
Yes, certainly, Commissioner, and thank you for that opening statement. I'll just come back to you before David starts, if I may. Everything you said we take on board and recognise, but I think there is not uncertainty, I can't think of the right phrase to use, but the industrial relations front. Now that year on year, moving forward, must be something that needs careful management and could undermine your plans if there's any significant industrial action or significant increase being demanded, being requested. So what's the view of industrial relations at the moment?
Locally, my view is positive. I'm absolutely relieved beyond belief that we avoided a national strike with firefighters. A year or so ago, this was the preoccupation of the whole sector across the country. It would have had implications for every other agency in the county, and it would have put lives at risk. So I'm delighted that that didn't happen. I think the public, looking at these budgets over the year, will see that there are considerable increases in wages and considerable increases in pension payments. And they'll be asking themselves, how am I or my children going to afford this? It's not new in the last couple of years, and I do have concerns about it going forward. We do have good relations. I meet with Fire Brigade Union and other unions representing the leaders and the retained firefighters on a regular basis. Disappointed to say at the last one, that meeting was cancelled because the Fire Brigade Union representatives were lobbying Parliament in London on the day. A bit disappointing. I'm hoping to rearrange that before the election because I'm interested to know what they and their members are thinking, and can't do that if they aren't there. As I've said before, my interest is Staffordshire, not national policy, not London policy, not urban policy, but Staffordshire. And I'm very determined to have good relations and open conversation. But operationally, there's things we need to do, and financially, there's things we need to do together because it's in the interest of the public. So I'll be doing my best to keep those relations professional and cordial, and that's, I think, everything that you'd expect of me.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner. David, if you're ready, please.
So thank you, Commissioner and Chairman, and good morning to the panel. So as part of the commentary I'm going to give you today, I'll cover off aspects of all four of the main papers, but of course I'll be focusing on the assumptions, the main assumptions that are contained within the medium-term financial strategy and of course the budget. But that main paper is then supported by, we've got the Treasury Management Strategy, the Reserve Strategy and also the Capital Programme Strategy with all of the detail. So happy to dip into any of the detail of any of the particular papers, but I'll cover off many of the areas in summary today. And I think just picking up on one or two of the points the Commissioner's made, setting the budget in the MTFS this year, again, has been challenging. We're on a backdrop of where inflation levels, although they're reducing, are still at high levels. We've got a lot of economic uncertainty, political uncertainty, and a further single-year settlement hasn't really made planning easy. It is quite difficult, and this volatility means that we're not going to get all the assumptions right as we move into the medium term. But I believe that the assumptions that we've got within this budget and MTFS are robust as possible at this time, given those uncertainties. So Chairman, just to kick off really, quick update on the current year position. So the financial position as at the end of December for 23-24, importantly, is in line with budget. We have delivered savings this year as part of the Prevention and Protection Review, where we've held vacancies during that review. We've also seen additional Section 31 grant and higher interest receipts from the cash that we hold. So all of that has resulted in a lower utilisation of reserves. This positive positioning here has also helped support the improved financial position and the picture that I'm presenting to you today as part of the medium term. And I think, just to echo what the Commissioner says, I'm very pleased to present a balanced budget position to the panel for the coming year 24-25. And really importantly, probably pretty much a first for me actually, to report a balanced position into the medium term, which is very positive. So the budget proposals presented to the panel today is for a revenue budget of just over 50 million, so £50.1 million, and it's actually aligned now to the final local government finance settlement. And whilst the final settlement that we received hasn't impacted on the overall figures, there have been some small changes to the Special Services Grant and the funding guarantee that we received as part of the provisional settlement. So if I could just go through one or two of the key elements with the panel, if that's okay, Chairman, with regard to the budget. So firstly, the proposed increase in budget is for a Band D council tax of 2.99%, which is an increase of £2.52 or 4 pence per week. And that increases the Band D council tax to £86.77. So this is a 2.99% increase, so just below the 3% referendum limit that's been set by the government for this year. If the panel can note as well, I think this is important, that the MTFS assumption for council tax increases for next year, for the year after 25-6, again is at 2.99%, and then the assumption beyond that is that the council tax increase will revert back to the previous lower level of 1.99%. As the Commissioner says, overall, the proposed increase in council tax remains below the level of headline inflation, as it did also when we set the budget for the current financial year. Now, the Commission has also said that whilst the proposed budget for next year does not include any material transformation requirement, I think it's important that the Commissioner will continue to review transformation options that will help to support the development of a new integrated risk management plan for the authority and the service as we continue in our journey to try and improve efficiency and deliver improved productivity. The Chief Fire Officer, of course, will continue to seek to look at ways to maximise the use of resources and how these key resources are aligned to risk. The budget and the MTFS also include a £1.3 million worth of recurring savings, of which 1.1 million has already been delivered. And this is the culmination of a significant amount of work undertaken by the Transformation Board that's been led by the Deputy Chief Fire Officer Glyn Lugeney. A transformation tracker has been developed as part of that process and has been regularly reported through to the Strategic Governance Board, which is chaired by the Commissioner. The budget for 24/5 also includes the net use of earmarked reserves of 0.1 million for 24/5 and 0.4 million for 25/6. Overall, the net use of reserves over the 5-year MTFS period is at £200,000. And this is in detail more within the reserve strategy. So I think, Chairman and panel, if I could just reflect really on some of the risks within the budget and the MTFS that I've picked up and is clearly mentioned within the report. Firstly, pay awards and the pay awards and what's the level of pay awards going to be into the medium term. Cost increases, and certainly the levels of inflation, predicting what they're going to be is challenging. The Commissioner's mentioned pensions. So the government has committed to fund the increase in employer contribution rates into the firefighter pension scheme, which has gone up from 28.8% to 37.6%. But the government at the moment have only committed to fund that for 1 year only. So it's guaranteed for next year. And at the moment we've got a reserve of 1.5 million, which would cover the increase in the following year if that grant wasn't continued. And also as well, it's also important to reflect on the funding guarantee that the Commissioner mentioned. The MTFS assumes that the funding guarantee and the reported increase in the core spending power for the authority, which has been reported at 5.7%, is maintained into 25/6 and beyond. Importantly, the details contained within the budget report have been through the governance process for the authority and presented to the Strategic Governance Board, again chaired by the Commissioner. I think as well, if I can just ask the panel to note the budget assumptions that are shown within paragraph 46 of the main report, and note that the pay assumption for 24/5 has been held and maintained at 5%, which is the same as the actual pay award for this year. And then it reduces back down to 3% for 25/26. Again as well, if the panel can note that the Commissioner has engaged with the local residents and stakeholders in relation to the precept, and the consultation showed that over 60% of respondents supported an increase in the fire and rescue precept of £2.50. So if I can just highlight one or two of the key points from the 4 papers then, I won't take too much time, but I think it's important just to reflect on one or two particular areas. So in terms of the precept and the council tax proposal, so based upon the latest proposals, the total precept included in the budget is 32.147 million, of which 401,000 is the reported council tax surplus. And it also includes an increase of 1.55%, which is the increase in the council tax base for the year. So if you can please refer to paragraph 18 on the main report, and the details of the precept and the council tax surplus and deficit and the council tax base are included within Appendix 4, 5 and 6. So this results in a total increase in council tax of 1.4 million. It basically represents around about 64% of the, or just below 2/3 of the total funding received for the authority. So if I can move on just to the capital programme. So the capital programme and the strategy is included as a separate paper, and also obviously supports the main budget and MTFS proposal. So the capital programme for next year has been set at 5.7 million, and that full scheme by scheme project and detail analysis is contained within Appendix 9 of the main report. The capital programme includes the final payment for the 2 heavy rescue appliances, and a payment profile for the next 5 appliances. And I'm sure the panel were quite amazed really when the Commissioner mentioned the actual cost of appliance now coming in at over £400,000. This is obviously a significant investment for every appliance that's purchased. The programme also includes the refurbishment of Brood Fire Station at £500,000, which is due to commence shortly. And again, importantly, is funded from the reserves and part of the reserve strategy. And the following year includes the refurbishment, a minor refurbishment for Tutbury Fire Station as well. The budget also includes £500,000 worth of investment into battery-operated cutting equipment. So this will ensure that all of our frontline appliances have the new technology for the battery-operated equipment. A comprehensive review of the capital programme, of course, will continue during 24/5 with major projects sub to business case approval through the governance process. And again, as the Commissioner said, we'll be focusing on environmental sustainability as part of that process. A revised capital framework has also been introduced for 24/25, which supports the capital process and will also incorporate a full approval tracker for every project that is undertaken. Moving on to the investment strategy. The investment and borrowing strategy is fully reviewed and considered within the Treasury Management Strategy. So based upon the capital financing requirements and the level of cash held, it is not anticipated that any new borrowing will be required until probably 2027. External borrowing is actually forecast to reduce marginally from 16.7 to 15.9 million by March 2027. And that's as part of the loan repayment schedule. The investment strategy for next year set out within the report, and I think importantly, with investment returns continuing at a much higher level, with rates of returns of just over 5% at the moment for the cash we hold. And of course, again importantly as well, we'll continue to use that cash that we hold in lieu of taking out additional borrowing. So in terms of the reserve strategy is set out as a separate report, and includes the unwinding of certain capital reserves, particularly, as I mentioned, for Abbots Bromley and for Tutbury. And we're also included within the budget some direct contributions to the vehicle replacement programme, which is very important and also contributes to keeping our debt levels at a lower level than they would have been without that contribution. So the general reserve sits at 1.9 million, with earmarked reserves forecast to reduce to 5 million by 27/28. So Chairman, I'm just going to close now, and if I could ask the panel to note the recommendations within the main report set out within A to L. And also, Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions. I would ask the panel to note the statement that I have made on the robustness of this budget and reserves position as required by Section 25 of the Local Government Act. And that statement's within paragraph 54 and 55 of the main report. So hopefully, panel, I've covered off a number of the key areas, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that very comprehensive report. Just casting my mind back to our pre-meeting where I picked up on a phrase regarding the capital programme. Some items have not been delivered, so the question was why, and there's a reference in there, the capital budget is challenging but deliverable. Now, I don't know whether you've given us an insight to what those challenges are. Is there any, could you just expand around that phrase for us, please?
Yes, of course, and I think it's a valid question because I think you will all be aware that we have had some challenges over the last 2 to 3 years in delivering the capital programme. It's an area that was raised by our external auditors within our value for money statement. And I think importantly, we're now in a position where, certainly when we look at the current year capital programme, it's absolutely on track, and the levels of spend have returned to a satisfactory, I use the word satisfactory, but we are spending our programme in year. Now, if I reflect on some of the issues that we've had over the last 2 to 3 years, yeah, where do I start really? You know, obviously coming out of COVID, the issues with Brexit and product availability, and a number of issues that we've had just really securing products and delivery dates. So we have seen some slippage, but I'm confident that we're now back on track And we are seeing, we've taken delivery of the 2 aerial ladder platforms. We've got 2 heavy rescue tenders that are due very shortly. And then we've got a further 5 appliances that we're ordering as part of our programme. So I'm confident that we're back on track. We've also in a position where we've completed the refurbishment of Abbots Bromley, which probably took us a little bit longer than we expected. But importantly, we're close to starting Brood, and we've also got Tutbury as well that we're considering. So I think we've made good progress. I think we're in a better shape, but I accept that the capital programme slippage has been greater than we would have liked over the last couple of financial years.
Chairman, I mean, you started actually with a question earlier on about strike action. Pandemic, war, strike action, these are pretty significant issues. Actually, it wasn't for not wanting to buy the appliances. You couldn't get them. You couldn't get them. They just weren't available. The parts weren't available. The product wasn't available. Just as a number of members of the panel will have had trouble buying cars and things like that in the last few years. The other thing that David hasn't mentioned there is we've just had a restructure of the estates team, which serves both police and fire, because I'm very anxious that the other projects, particularly around shared estate, where police are taking some space in fire stations, also progresses at pace now, because that's been delayed beyond where I wanted it to be as well. So we're in a much better place with all of that. A lot of it, I'm afraid, was just completely beyond our control. Just on the estate, I think it's worth noting that we've got terrific estate here. We're not like other parts of the country where people are, particularly the service deliverers are saying they're not in suitable buildings. We've got excellent buildings. We're talking about refurbishments, bringing some of the older estate up to high standards. It's mostly excellent. And the opportunity there going forward, I think, is considerable. Just on capital, I've got some concerns. A bit like I said last week, it's a moving target, the capital programme. I think we need to be doing more in the IT area. It's stable, but it is not. I don't believe we've got enough substantive investment in there to take the service forward, or even to maintain that stability and security going forward. So I expect to see that growing in the next few years. I'm also very conscious that there's likely to be a big control centre update. Those who don't know might not be aware, we share our control centre with the West Midlands. 18 months ago they had an upgrade which did not go particularly well. I didn't feel we were close enough to it. There's another one coming and it may cost us some money. So I want to be sure that that still represents excellent value for money. It does at the moment, but I want to make sure it stays there. In response to that less than perfect implementation of an upgrade, I met with the Chief Fire Officer there, a gentleman by the name of Wayne Brown. Oh, goodness. Who's not with us anymore. Anyway, we're going to maintain that relationship, and I'll be keeping an eye on that as part of the capital programme as well. Just pass my condolences on to everybody there, his family, his friends, and everybody at West Midlands.
Right, thank you, Commissioner. Charlotte Atkins in a moment, if I may. Just one point on the, if I could use the phrase, on the transformation of the fire service and the aspirations that you've shared with us today. I'm sitting here thinking the progress, the pace, excellent to get to this point. Am I getting a sense that pace will continue to get these changes in place? Or are there any restrictions on the budget that could see it? I've tried to allude to that earlier. I get a sense that the finances may slow the pace down. Is that a wrong assumption, do you think?
Yeah, if I'm re-elected, we're certainly keeping up the pace. And there's a senior leadership team here that know what they're doing. This service is fine, and it's going to be fine as long as we keep going as we're going. It's too important not to.
Thank you, Commissioner. Charlotte Atkins.
Yeah, am I right in assuming that 2/3 of the revenue budget is taken up by pay? Is that right? Something like that?
So broadly, so just under 70% is pay, yeah.
Yeah. So therefore, I mean, I see in the budget, obviously, you're budgeting for a 5% increase. I mean, what are your sort of contingency arrangements should pay rises go above that? I mean, obviously, I'm not even talking about pensions, but clearly pay could go above that depending on what's happening with inflation, because that is a significant part of the revenue budget. And I see that obviously in future years you're talking about a 3% pay rise, which if inflation doesn't come down to the sort of OBR expected level, then we're probably talking about pay rises above that. So for one, I mean, you'll know this, for an increase of 1% over and above what you've budgeted for, what sort of figures are we talking about in terms of the impact on the revenue budget?
So just to respond to that, Chairman, so thank you for that question. So, and it is a good question. It's a question that we've had quite detailed discussions about during the budget and the MTFS setting process. And it's a difficult one because we're trying to actually make assumptions around what's going to happen. And in the next I think it's difficult enough to assume, to try and estimate what's going to happen next year. And just to give you an idea, there's been quite a lot of conversation and discussion around pay award levels for next year. And at 5%, we're actually probably the higher end of what fire and rescue authorities generally are assuming. Because inflation has been dropping, a number of authorities have dropped that assumption down to 4 or down to 3%, in fact. And whilst the level of inflation is reducing, we've got to look at history, we've got to look at the fact that there was a 7% award in 2022, a 5% award in 2023. So where's it going to land in July of this year? We're sort of saying it's going to be 5%. If it's more than that, if it's 6%, then that's another £250,000 broadly that we've got to find. Now, where would that come from? We've obviously got a reserve strategy. So we have got some reserve. The reserve strategy does incorporate areas for some of that uncertainty. But if the pay awards do continue to come in at a much higher rate for a period of time, then that, of course, will give us pressure into the medium term. Now, the other part of the equation is around council tax, and obviously that's around the Commission's decision. But we've assumed that council tax drops back in line with the pay. So the way we generally do it is if we're back to a 2% council tax increase, we've dropped the pay down to 2% to balance them off. So I would hope and I would estimate that if the inflation rates do continue to be high and the pay awards are higher, then the council tax referendum limit will also reflect that higher level. But it is a risk, and I think as a point as I made out at the start, the assumptions are difficult.
What I'm not aware of is whether you're carrying vacancies at the moment among the workforce, whether it be frontline or back office staff. And obviously, if you are carrying a number of vacancies, then of course the pay award becomes even more important.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So in terms of vacancies, we just reflect as part of the budget setting process. I mentioned about the current year performance. So we have been carrying some vacancies for prevention staff. That review has pretty much now been completed, and we've got a saving of around about £300,000 that's been incorporated now as part of those overall transformation savings. So that's quite important. So there aren't any other significant areas of vacancy apart from our on-call, where we're always recruiting and we're always trying to increase the numbers of staff across that area. And as members of the panel will note, that is an issue, not just in Staffordshire, but that's an issue nationally.
Just a comment to say how good the estate is. I mean, certainly with the Leek Fire Station, really helpful to have community rooms I think the only problem with community rooms is that you obviously have to have a certain amount of liability insurance, which can be difficult for some groups, but it's a fantastic facility to have those meeting rooms available for groups who might not be able to access other community facilities.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks, David. Just to reiterate that the policy we take, I insist on actually with assumptions, is that they're prudent, they're on the right side of risk. 5% is higher than I'm imagining nearly every other fire authority is setting their budget at the moment. I think some places going with their fingers crossed. It's got to be the other way around for me. It's worth remembering some of the pay awards being considered or suggested around the time of the strike, they were not affordable, they wouldn't have been funded, and it would have meant the loss of firefighters' jobs. If pay awards are higher and not funded nationally, it will mean fewer firefighters. So I think there has to be a real understanding now nationally of what is affordable and practical. So I'm hoping we won't go there. We haven't, but I'm hoping we don't. We just recruited, I think, 6 more whole-time firefighters, David. Thousands of applicants, which is great news. The real ambition and target is to keep increasing the number of on-call firefighters, and no doubt we'll pick that up later when we talk about the safety plan and all the things we're doing to make those on-call firefighter jobs that bit more attractive.
That's an interesting point, Commissioner. If I could just jump out of the conversation. You mentioned applicants and a wealth of applicants. Are you able to address diversity and female firefighters? Are they something that's uppermost in your mind when this sort of activity is underway?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, I believe we discussed it at a previous public performance meeting, but we do regularly at our governance boards. Ahead of that recruitment process, we undertook to make sure that everybody who was applying had absolute levels of support they needed to get through to the final testing process. I don't know the number of females that have made it into that last grouping. Would you know that, David, off the top of your head? No, we'll come back to you with that. Yeah, it's still lower, but you will have seen in our senior team more representation by female officers and professional staff. And we did a direct recruitment this year, one of, I think, 6 or 7 force areas that did that, brought someone in at station manager level, an excellent female candidate who's really brought some skills with her from outside fire and rescue, which is greatly to be appreciated.
Yeah. David, we asked a question at the last meeting when we were discussing the police to do with the MRP, prudent cost measures. We were advised that someone will come back and explain that meaning to us today. Are you able to do that?
Chairman, happy to do that, yes, of course. Before we do that, though, I just had a message, somebody must be watching online, that there were 2 females as part of the 16 recruits. 16, yeah. So there were 2 females and there were 1,300 applications in total. So MRP, so how long have we got?
Well, not too long, but it's just an action from the last meeting, just for clarification, really.
So basically, the minimum revenue provision.
Could I just stop you there one moment?
Yes.
Stand gentleman there. There's a reflection on your pass.
Close the curtains.
The gentleman sitting to your right. Is there? What's his name? Fine, thank you.
We're good to go. So MRP is basically for the provision of debt repayment. And I think the panel you might have picked up previously, this was historically within the public sector was set at 4%, but we now do it differently, and our minimum MRP policy set out within the capital strategy within section 9. So the way we do our provision for debt repayment is on an asset life method basis. So, for example, a new fire appliance at £400,000, we provide for the repayment of that debt over a 15-year period, and that provision's put through the revenue on an annual basis. So it's a bit like so basically it's just a methodology to ensure that the debt that we've got, we are providing for that repayment over the life of assets that we are purchasing.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
That's an answer, thank you.
I understand it, sorry.
Well, yes, we value your experience contribution, thank you. Colleagues, any more questions? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question really on page 24. We've got 550,000 insurance loss impact of data breach. Can you elaborate? It's page 24. Risk assessment of general reserves, 24-25. Oh, right.
Sorry, Chair, I've got Appendix 7 on page 24.
Sorry, Appendix 3. My apologies. Page 24, Appendix 3.
Oh, excuse me.
So we've got risk of incurring uninsured losses, risk of breach due to inappropriate information sharing, failure to implement GDPR.
That's in the general. Yeah, that's in the general reserve. David, would you mind?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so that's just basically a provision that if in the event of significant data breach and the authority being fined for a significant data breach, then we hold a general provision. And I think it's important for members of the panel just to know that this general reserve assessment, it's picking up some of the it's picking up the high and medium risks that we hold that we don't provide any general provision for within our account. So should, in the unfortunate event of there being a significant data breach, we were fined for that, then we would have a general reserve to cover that.
Now, I just find it quite strange, actually, that there is a reserve of that value. One would have expected it in other organisations that you wouldn't have that in terms of your budget, because you would have taken actions to prevent.
Chairman, I'll take that comment and reflect on it and review it. I think as we move forward, it's a fair comment.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chairman. Appendix 4, the council tax surplus deficit by authorities. I'm trying to come to how the figures. I mean, I appreciate they're from the different authorities, but there's from the surplus to the deficit, there's quite some considerable differences. Stafford 21, then for 22-23, 23-24 it goes up to 109, then 24-25 there's a deficit of 6,000, yeah, and Stoke we start off low and it increases extremely high, which obviously in terms of then the overall variation gives you not a great issue to be looking at. But what happens if those assumptions don't occur? Then you've got possibly a big variation that doesn't balance the books.
Chairman, yeah, Councillor Cox points out quite an interesting. This is one of the reasons that we can't finalise the budgets until relatively close to the date, is because we don't know the exact council tax forecast from each authority, and there are some interesting variations this year. A really positive additional amount of council tax being paid by Stoke-on-Trent, and some other areas which are quite surprising. I think we've got to be careful perhaps not to draw too many conclusions here as to whether households were in some areas a little better off than they might have been in previous years, or whatever the actual situation is. I do wonder, and perhaps David could help all of us here. I know Stafford I think they had a policy to try and support some lower paying households last year, something I wasn't entirely comfortable with. Would that be reflected in the deficit that's presented there? Or is this related to something else?
So in terms of the, it's a good question, by the way. Thank you very much. And I wish I could answer it exactly, but I can't. But I will give you a sort of an overview. So basically, the billing authorities make assumptions with their council tax collection. They assume the level of collection in terms of a percentage. They assume a bad debt provision, and also as well they'll assume the impact of different council tax reduction schemes. Now, in theory, any council tax reduction scheme would have been reflected in the council tax base because it would have reduced the base slightly. But again, it could be a contributing factor to the overall surplus or deficit position. Now, I'll give you my sort of view on this. Is generally the position across all the billing authorities is fairly consistent year on year. So that you can see here 22.3, just under 300,000, and the last couple of years have been very close actually, just over £400,000. Now, if you look back over the last 10 years, that position is fairly consistent, apart from obviously the impact of COVID. And I think this will probably help to explain members what happened. So during COVID, people couldn't afford to pay, the collection rates were down, people didn't pay their council tax, because there were obviously a lot of issues for people's personal income during that period of time. So we saw quite big reductions during a couple of years of COVID. But that's now recovered, and we're back to sort of levels that we've seen. So overall, bottom line, broadly is fairly consistent, but as you can see, the assumptions made by the billing authorities changes, and they will review their position. If they're in surplus, they will change their assumption moving forward. So which means you do get a bit of yo-yoing really in terms of the position that each billing authority presents on an annual basis. I just hope that those levels stay as it is, because we do assume that there is a level of surplus into the medium term.
Okay.
Yeah, I get the rationale behind it, and it's probably not as easy to predict, but those variances are quite considerable in some cases. So it might be something that we need to drill down and try and get some consistency.
Yeah, significant variations there, aren't they? Commissioner, were you wanting to come back?
Yeah, just briefly, and I don't want to pre-guess this because I don't know the detail, but I'm going to be asking for that. I would hope that authorities would collect pragmatically, taking account of people's circumstances. But it's not right that some people pay, some people don't. And I do, as I said before, have some nervousness about one or two decisions recently by districts and boroughs to set lower rates or not collect from a certain group of residents. That's fine, but it isn't limited just to the local council tax element. It affects the amount of council tax that goes to the top tier authority and the amount of council tax that goes to the police and fire service. So again, they're essentially asking other parts of Staffordshire and Stoke to subsidise the people they've chosen not to make a collection from. Most people like to pay their local taxes, and when you look at a service like the Fire and Rescue Service, which I think was pointed out, 2/3 is local taxes, this is a local service, and it's something people value and would wish to be, that it was fairly contributed to. So I'll continue to have conversations with tax authorities about those choices, because I think it needs to be fair across the piece.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any more questions? No? Right. At this point. Right. So at this point, we've taken some time to discuss the MTFS and the precept. We'll adjourn for a moment, Commissioner, deliberate and return. Thank you. Commissioner, we agree to the 2.99% precept as detailed at item C. And we've also noted items D to L on the paper that you was submitted to us. I want to go on and say, though, that we do have an area of concern that we'll make note of regarding the £1.9 million to cover items listed in Appendix 3, the risk assessment and general reserves. We do not know what the justification for that 1.9 million is and what it will cover. So we'll make note of that in our report to you after the meeting. Right, if we could revert back to the agenda now. We start at 5, do we?
Item 6.
Item 6 on the agenda. Anything to say, Commissioner?
Yes, really pleased to bring this update to you actually on the safety plan. There's a number of key items in here and it addresses some questions, requests for more information from panel members in previous meetings as well. Firstly, just to remind you that we've reviewed the timing of the community risk management plan that the service is required to put together. That's what we call here the safety plan. Decided to run this one until the end of December. This gives us an opportunity to consult with the community through the summer, but also to take account of the fire and rescue plan as set out by the Commissioner, whoever that should be, following the May election. I think that allows for the two important plans to be brought together, and I'm hopeful actually that it's a policy that will be followed elsewhere as we have hopefully more commissioners in charge of services around the country. In the period there's been a refresh. You'll see in item 3.6 there's been a number of changes. The key thing about this document is it's where the service makes its professional assessment of risk, and in doing so those sorts of their decisions are what govern the operational delivery of the service, and it gives an opportunity for the public to be made aware of the risk considerations, the reality of risk actually as well, and what that might mean for location of service and the number of teams and the nature of teams, shifts, etc. I've been asked previously at this panel about a trial of so-called threes for on-call staff, and there's a really helpful summary of where we've got to as at the end of January. Item 4, that's page 3 onwards. I'd just like to take the opportunity. We've discussed this an awful lot. It came up at a meeting I attended in the Moorlands a couple of weeks ago as well. I have some concerns, Chairman, that nationally the Fire Brigades Union do not like this. Nationally. Nationally, their stated position is they will never like it. This isn't a negotiation or a conversation. It's a stated position. Locally, their members support it. Locally, it means, I've got the very latest numbers here, 555 incidents have been attended by retained firefighters, on-call firefighters, that would not otherwise have been attended. That's 342 incidents and 213 standbys. That standby is when they move an appliance team from one place to another to back up a higher risk deployment. 342 incidents. Now, just stepping back to the end of January, that's 94 building fires, 65 road traffic accidents, 58 automatic fire alarms, 33 fires in rural areas, 17 vehicle fires, and 18 incidents involving animals that would not have had the benefit of those teams' attendance, either as the first appliance or second or third, contributing to the safety of their colleagues and managing the incident in partnership with them. There's been considerable consultation of everybody involved. In fact, one of the reasons that we want to roll the trial for some degree further is to make sure that those who've not yet been called out as a 3 get to contribute to the consultation as well on the benefit of their experience. And there will be an opportunity for the public to comment during the consultation on the safety plan. I am absolutely sure if we ask the public, do you think it's a good idea that these teams are attending? They would say yes, providing it's safe. So, 4.4, 338 emergency incidents, no reported safety concerns. Now, the service, as you know, has a really rigorous, formal process for reporting safety concerns when you're out on an incident. If there had been one, there would have been a report of it. It's an absolute imperative for everybody involved. It means the availability is improved, and, as I said to you before, the capability, the experience, the job satisfaction, the reason to be and stay and keep, the reason to want to be an on-call firefighter is greatly enhanced by being out doing the work, doing what they want to do, which is keep people safe. Now, as part of the consultation, there's looking to actually increase some of the things they might go to. Motorway incidents, prison incidents. Prison incidents are quite a big deal in some parts of the county, notably in South Staffordshire as it happens. Quite a lot of deliberate fire setting in prisons, unfortunately. And opportunities for wider expansion of it. I'm not going to prejudge the outcome, but the trial at the moment is going extremely positively, and I want everybody to contribute to that. I would appreciate a local representative view, not a national one, and I'm not getting it. And I would appreciate that people who were lobbying on this gave a balanced view so that people could make a decision that was informed, not misinformed. Now, more positive news. We've talked about the Falls Response service. That has been out now to very nearly 1,000 people in about 14 months. I think it's 950 people. Tremendously successful. There's some more detail here about the, in 4.11 onwards, a little more detail from the team there. That's 863. Actually, it's about 940 now. And the process of triage and the standard of training, because that came up before. And the home from hospital pilot, that's been running since the 4th of December. The latest on that, 191 times that the fire service has helped somebody get home from hospital. The good news there, only 1 patient readmission out of that. So that's really helping the NHS during the, to handle the winter pressures. We're not sure that that's going to continue after the spring because it's particularly a winter pressure thing, but why not, I would say, if it's value for money for the NHS and keeps our prevention team doing the right thing. Very, very hopeful that the Falls Response provision will continue, but again, that's subject to negotiation. And Chairman, we didn't reference the public consultation on the council tax. If anybody has read it, they'll probably agree with me. It makes some interesting reading. I didn't come out unscathed. I don't think anybody did, actually. Lots of comments on how to do the world better. One of the things there was, why aren't our fire service going around doing a little bit more to help other services under pressure? Well, here you are. Here in Staffordshire we are. We're helping the NHS. They won an award for the Falls Response Team, National Award. I think it's the future actually for the service. It's not going to be their core job and never should be. But why wouldn't you use those experts, that professionalism, that caring service to do everything we can more widely? Finally, just a reference, if I may, to the volunteering and item 6.6. Tremendous number of people get stuck in to assist the fire and rescue service. They do a fantastic job. There's a reference there to our education teams that deliver the safe and sound training into schools. The Prince's Trust, which is also a good programme. And finally, very importantly actually, because the timing is now, an update on our HMI, that's His Majesty's Rescue inspectors. They'll be coming in fact they're in now, inspecting as part of their main review. You can see the items there they listed as not good enough last time. Made good progress on them and looking forward to a really thorough inspection. I'm disappointed in a way. They won't be reporting it before the summer. I'm very, very confident that the outcome's going to be good. But my job is to make sure that this has had rigorous oversight. This tracker that you can see the pictures of here indicates just how thorough and open and transparent that is within the service. Every task is owned, and I think HMI will see that this Staffordshire Fire and Rescue are absolutely going in the right direction. 7.9 mentions a thematic inspection. This final bit in this paper. My Chief Executive, Louise, and I have taken considerable interest in misconduct culture in Staffordshire Fire and Rescue, mostly because of concerns elsewhere in the country, which are disturbing. HMI asked if we would be part of a thematic inspection. We won't be individually marked on that. We have had a debrief. I'm not at liberty to say too much about that in detail, other than to say I'm not worried. As a result of that, I'm greatly reassured actually by the thematic inspection. However, you can see there the amount of work that the service has been doing in terms of encouraging people to make complaints, encouraging people to bring issues to the attention of the senior leaders and in fact their line management. And Louise and I will continue to keep an eye on every individual case because we think it's important and the public would want to be reassured that we are doing that in partnership with the service. So there you are, Chairman. That's the update on the safety plan, a pretty robust update on where we are.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think from what you described there, the reach and service being provided by the fire service into the community provides a necessary level of reassurance to the service, and I think the panel will compliment the service on all the good work that they're doing, and the community are really grateful for that. Paragraph 7.9 is a concern, as you say, and historically across the UK it makes really, really disappointing reading. But in terms of building up reputation and trust in the service, we know in Staffordshire that's being done, and I think you've said to us that there's no real need for anyone to be concerned in Stafford at the moment about those sorts of things. Have I read that right?
Chairman, I think that's a fair assessment, but we are not without. Every organisation has cultural difficulties, individuals that might not be happy. The key thing is to make sure they have an opportunity very early on to express concerns and they get dealt with properly. I'm particularly pleased the service is bringing in independent people to assist when there needs to be an internal investigation, just to maintain the integrity of that. I wouldn't say I've been entirely without concerns in the last 3 years, but we are not in the place of the London Fire Brigade or I think it was Southwell, one or two others that have got in a real pickle with this. It's really disappointing that this is even an issue for our blue light services, but I'm afraid it is. And the key thing is we need to work it through, and the processes need to be robust, and they are.
I think we're getting the message that you have a grip, and that's all we can particularly ask at the moment, I think. Just looking at the RAG ratings in this part of the paper, the reds where it says on track but in progress, it's always very vague, isn't it? What does that mean then? Why can't you put dates to those reds?
I asked exactly the same question at my Strategic Governance Board a few weeks ago. I think this is a pretty good example of where they're open. Actually, some of these issues, it's because there's been, there are reasons why they can't progress. They're in discussion with the inspectors about all of these items. It's understood, and it's generally the case that all these particular red ones are also in that at that stage with other authority areas as well, other forces. Now I'm just going to ask for a reminder, because we asked particularly item 21 there, 360-degree feedback. I was thinking, well, why on earth couldn't you have had your 360-degree feedback sessions? You know, what's stopping you? And I can't remember what they said, Louise, can you? Let's put her on the spot.
I may well defer to David, but thank you, Commissioner. It's something that we did discuss at the Strategic Governance Board, as the Commissioner said, and there's a level of consistency nationally that's being considered as to what this actually looks like. So it isn't that feedback hasn't taken place. It doesn't quite perhaps match the criteria outlined nationally. But David, is there anything you wanted to add?
I think Commissioner, just to add to that, as far as I'm aware, that progress is being made, it will be implemented, and I think that will be updated through to the Governance Board. So I can't really say any more than it is being developed. It is on track.
Chairman, apologies to my colleagues. It's my memory that's at fault, not theirs. I shouldn't have put them in that position. I'll come back and reassure you again, because I was reassured by the answer I got. They have had the sessions, but not necessarily to the specification that HMI was setting out. So it seems other forces feel the same about that.
So certainly, Commissioner, the senior team have undertaken that 360. Yep. So
good.
I think where we see a red indicator, the importance of the commentary, if it's changing or if it's moving, it ought to be updated. Because there's nothing worse than reading the same as you read 6 months ago, ongoing. It's incredibly frustrating. Colleagues have some questions, if I may. Councillor Cox first, please.
I'll give way to my colleague from Stoke. He had indicated before I did, but obviously your eye caught me first, but I will give way.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
That's kind of you. Thank you, Councillor Cox. Yeah, I want to go back to the crew staffing levels that you talked about, and I note the comments from the Commissioner earlier about the FBU lobbying government, but they're quite right to do so, because we've lost 12,000 firefighters since 2010, so we certainly need more urgent investment in recruitment, and perhaps that's why we're having a debate about safe staffing levels, safe crew levels today, 14 years on. And I think it's also important to recognise the FBU certainly decades of experience, and which can't be brushed under the carpet here. Now, going into the report, it says, and I quote, in general, on-call teams feel safe, but then a couple of paragraphs later, it goes on to say, quote, many on-call firefighters have not yet experienced being mobilised as a crew of 3. So it seems a little bit early in the day to make the earlier statements that on-call teams feel safe. I think it would also be useful for panel members to receive some more detailed reports moving forward. It also says in the report that there's an expectation that communities expect firefighters to attend as quickly as possible. Absolutely right they do. But I think residents across the county and the city also expect firefighters not to put their safety at risk. So I think that's an important point to make in terms of it. I've got some questions anyway. In terms of the wait time being cut, can you confirm how many of the calls that went out as a three-person team had to wait for any backup? And then just a point about more detailed reports. You talked about the 4 focus groups being held with staff. And you talked about support locally. What is the actual evidence of that support locally? And can we have some detailed reports about the focus groups to be brought to the panel? Thank you.
Commissioner.
Yeah, Chairman, I mean, we're bringing more and more detail to every meeting, aren't we? I'm very happy to keep doing that. The focus groups, I understand it, are internal. They're not sort of public focus groups. The opportunity for the public to comment on this will be as part of the safety plan consultation in the summer. And that will be when we've given every firefighter the opportunity to feedback their experience. One of the reasons I wanted to extend it is those few that haven't yet experienced it can also comment to say that they feel comfortable with the process as well. And Councillor Williams, I couldn't agree with you more. People want the very best service as quickly as possible, but they absolutely want the firefighters to be safe, and so do I, and so do you. So it's that's absolutely fundamental, non-negotiable.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner, I think this is a very productive meeting. And of course it enables the elected members here to formulate a wide range of questions. And of course, that's a challenge for you, and it's an opportunity to support you where necessary. So long may it continue, because I think we're getting some benefit. That's our objective. Do you want to come back?
Thank you. Am I on? Yeah, thank you. I did ask a specific question about the wait times and how many of, when we sent out 3 crews, 3-member crew, how many have had to wait for backup to also come?
Councillor Williams, wait times. Which item in the paper?
So it talks about, I'll find the exact bit in a minute, but it talks about the, when we send out the 3-member crews,
yes.
My question is how many times have they had to wait for any backup crews to go out if they haven't got the right level of safe staffing?
I'll be very happy to confirm that, but my understanding at the minute is if the nature of the incident, and that might include a house fire, is not deemed at the moment suitable for the 3-crew response, it requires a 4-crew response, then that 3-crew team is not dispatched to be the first on site. So we're not placing them in a position where they're having to wait because they're not sent first to those types of incidents. That doesn't mean, as you can't see, there's hundreds of others where they can attend and quite often can manage the task on their own, or they're there as a supporting team. But I will ask that specific question. Thank you.
Councillor Cox, did you want to come back?
I will. I think I'm going down the same line as Councillor Williams in many respects. But I have noted, in a sense, different to what was said. Obviously, locally, the force in Staffordshire, you're saying that the three-man crew is acceptable in practice against the national trend of objecting to it. Could you clarify that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to clarify that. A lot of other fire and rescue service areas have already adopted crews of 3. So the national trend is actually more crews of 3, especially if they face challenges like we do, being a mixture of rural and urban, where you really do need those on-call teams to back up the whole time provision or be there first in isolated areas. So we're not first into this, we're not pioneering. The national position is the national stated position of the Fire Brigades Union. It is not the national position of fire services. They're not quite the same thing, although some organisations would think they are. So we are pursuing here a path that is well trodden elsewhere, but we're doing it, as you can see, I think, extremely rigorously. We're going to be in almost 18 months worth of trial period, and we're going to drive this and take it forward based on the opinions primarily of the firefighters themselves I'm very interested in what firefighters say, and then I'm interested in what the public says in balancing the improved service with what might be presented by some as an additional risk. But at the moment, as you can see, we're not seeing any additional risk.
Yes, certainly.
Chairman. Yeah, I appreciate that it was a union status and not obviously why I misled it, but I do thank you for the clarification. I think what that leads on to for me is obviously in terms of the public perception of what actually was required by the fire service. And obviously there's a line that is being taken by Staffordshire and other authorities. And I'm wondering whether actually the comms side of it, getting to that general public, should be uplifted in a sense to really, if we're not careful, the headlines could be on the negative, but the headlines could be the positive. And it's trying to drill that message across that whilst we understand concern, we are quite okay with the levels of safety, which is what we're talking about, are going to be delivered, and there's no compromise.
Chairman, through you, I think that's really important. I'm speaking to scrutiny committees about this, councils. If Lichfield wanted to invite me, I'd be happy to talk about this. The Chief Fire Officer, the Deputy's been as well to explain the process and the consultation and what the experience is. I think it's beholden on community representatives like yourself to be part of that balanced conversation, but to hear from both sides. And I think there is a task for us in terms of communicating it. And that's fundamental to the safety plan, the CRMP review. We want as many people as possible to give an informed opinion on this. I think it's particularly timely because there are other places at the moment, quite a few actually, where the authority for fire is still either linked to the county council and is under pressure because of the pressure on those authorities around social care, for funding, for good stations, etc. And we're seeing decisions being made all around the country about reducing the number of stations or the amount of hours that they're open, the amount of firefighters that they have. I'd really like to avoid all of that if we can in Staffordshire by having a proven safe delivery model. So we're not always going to get 100% availability on the on-call model in parts of the Moorlands, South Staffs, Lichfield even. It's just not going to happen. But if we can get it at 60-70% rather than 30-40, that makes a huge difference. So we want to keep working towards these ambitions. And notwithstanding, if you're an on-call firefighter, you absolutely want to be doing the job. You don't want to be told, sorry, you can't help here because you're in a 3, not a 4. There's plenty they can do and do, and it saves lives.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Chair. First, a comment. When you were questioned at Staffordshire Moorlands, you were being questioned by a retired firefighter. And the reason I think he was very concerned about the 3-man crew or 3-person crew is because he understands the motivation of firefighters. And, you know, if they see people in danger, they will go in, even though perhaps for their own safety they should hold back and wait for backup. And I think he's concerned that if this becomes a more general operational model, that firefighters will go in because that's their motivation. And to tell a 3-person crew that actually they have to wait probably doesn't work tremendously well when you've got people who are very determined to save lives. So I think that is so that's understandably coming from a operational firefighter, perhaps having been in that situation where he has concerns about what might happen in a more general, I think in a trial situation, you know, you are going to be making sure you have all the backups. But the problem is, if you get to a point where it's a more general operational decision, then you could have a situation where, you know, decisions are made by individual firefighters which perhaps are not great for their own safety. But anyway, moving on to the work that the fire service is doing with the NHS, I know I raised the issue around falls. I see that 85% of the falls incidents did not require further backup from the NHS, which is great. But are we ensuring that with those 15% where it might not be sensible to move the individual, are we ensuring that there's proper training to make sure that someone's not moved if perhaps they've got a broken hip, something like that? That's the first question. And the second question is, given that the fire service is working much more with the NHS, what is the situation at the moment in terms of defibrillators on fire service vehicles?
Thanks, Councillor Atkins. I think your colleague at Moorlands, he is a retired firefighter. He's also a regional or national brigade rep for the Fire Brigades Union, wasn't he? So he's clearly getting a view. I'm not sure how in touch he is with the current on-call firefighters that are doing this job, and happy to say that they want to continue to do so. It's the moral dilemma you talk about is the key, and actually that's part of this communication challenge, isn't it? That's a powerful statement. You can present that in such a way that people say we can't even go near it. But if you talk about 500 odd incidents and no safety reviews, that's the other side. And we do have to make judgments, all of us, we do certainly, because that's what we're elected to do, as to where's the balance in the interests of the public there, and I'm sure we will. Yeah, the response, the prevention team that involved with the falls response, they're trained to FREC level 3 trauma, all of them, and they've all had additional training around equipment, safeguarding, data protection, etc. before they take on the job. And just to remind you, none of these tasks go straight to the fire service with a request for assistance without being triaged by the ambulance service. Now, occasionally they're going to get the wrong information, aren't they, and perhaps send somebody. But I imagine that happens anyway. They might send the wrong type of provision. I know it happens in police and fire. You get to an incident and find it's far more serious than it was presented to you on the phone. My guess is that the 85% picked up with no injuries. Actually, 5% in addition to that are picked up before the falls team even get there. So somebody else has had a go. That 90% are probably absolutely chuffed to death that somebody's been there and got them back into a good position.
Please, Commissioner. Just a point, Councillor Atkins, just around the threes. And I'm sorry, I wasn't quite aware of what was discussed at Staffordshire Moorlands, but in terms of, there's quite strict protocols around what threes can be mobilised to. So, for example, if there's a house fire that's well alight, then we wouldn't mobilise a crew of 3 to be in attendance first. So we wouldn't do that. So we're obviously very careful around what incidents the crews go to. I think, you know, within the report it says that where we are sending crews of 3s out there, they're there 9 minutes and 45 seconds ahead of a main crew. So there's always things they can do for the incident prior to that crew arriving. So I think, you know, in that 9 minutes, obviously they can make quite a significant impact onto the scene that they're attending.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Atkins, anything else?
Fibs?
Yes, you raised that, didn't you, at the local scrutiny. I need to speak to the Chief Officer and come back to you on that for me.
Sorry, Commissioner. Defibs are on all frontline appliances.
All of them now,
all
are
of
they?
them, yeah, they
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Leeson?
thought it wasn't going to work then. You've probably answered some of mine. One's a comment and one's a question. I mean, I was quite lucky. I went to a scrutiny meeting not long ago and Ron Barber gave a very good presentation about the three-man crewing. So part of what you just said there was what I was going to make a comment on, that they only go out to certain incidents and they go out with another crew. But there seems to be positive feedback from crew members about three-man crewing. I think it's good news that the trial's been extended, and particularly the need at the end of that extension that there will be another consultation with the public before a final decision is made. So at the moment it's all sounding quite positive, and it sounds as though the workforce are on board with it as well. I've got a question though about 4.14, the trial, discharge and settle in service. I think it ends at the end of March. And you may not know the answer to this. I just wondered if there was any indication that it would continue, or will you have to wait until you get to the end of March and get the feedback?
That was the hospital to home? Yeah. That's the one where we've basically been asked to assist during a period of winter pressure. At the moment, it's not certain whether they'll ask us to continue with that. I certainly hope they consider it, and I would hope that they certainly consider it again next year, because in a way, manning up to deal with the extraordinary peaks they have in the winter is probably not efficient through the rest of the year. So, and the Fire and Rescue Service are ready to assist them.
Sorry, can I just add to that? We have literally just received notification that, I know it's not a long period, but we've been extended to the end of April. So that's a slight positive. Although obviously we would like to have been extended further, but we've been given a further month.
Okay, thank you. Move to item 7 on the agenda, Commissioner, if I may.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the annual update on police complaints. And again, important that we cover this off here, I think, and I offer some reassurance that this is absolutely something that is a focus for me and my team. Just to remind members, there's a change in functions for commissioners back in 2020 as a result of public concern. So that actually strengthens my role in terms of independence, and particularly in managing appeals or so-called reviews following complaints. One or two commissioners have taken the view that they go further than me, and they actually have the complaints team within their organisation, within the Commissioner's office, rather than dealing with reviews as we do, which is, I believe, the sort of stage 1 process. Not entirely convinced about that, but we are going to be visiting some of those areas just to assess the added value of that. You'll note in the paper that there's a slight uptick in complaint numbers over the last 2 or 3 years. Now, on the one hand, I'd rather they were going the other way, but on the other hand, if that's an indication that more people feel confident they can complain, there's clear routes to complain, that's okay. However, there's also an uptick in the number of appeals, reviews. Now that would indicate to me that more people are not happy with the outcome of their complaint. So this is an area of which I'm keeping quite a close eye on at the moment. I'm not ruling anything out or in. I think the model we've adopted is the right one. I'd just like to be absolutely assured about the trends here. Interesting to note the nature of the things people are complaining about are pretty much the same as they have been in recent years. They're generally around action following contact, the sharing of information, which is something I'm absolutely determined to improve, just keep people better informed about their case, more aware of action being taken. And then ultimately, sometimes people, understandably, are not happy about decisions. Now, that's always going to be the case. There'll be a decision made by the police officer or an investigating team, weighing up all the factors that is not necessarily the one that the person complaining would have hoped to have. So just a little bit of movement here that I'm not entirely comfortable with. What I am very pleased with is the number of complaints that are being handled outside of the more formal Schedule 3. Now, I have challenged this. I want to make sure people aren't making a choice not to have the right of review because they've not been properly informed. And I'm assured that's the case. Actually, even if they're outside Schedule 3, they do have a right to review. And I would encourage them to do so if they weren't happy. But what it does mean is our triage team and complaints team are handling a huge percentage of complaints very quickly. Quite often people want an apology. They want to know that learning has been taken, and they want to know that their experience has been properly understood and taken account of. I don't think that warrants a huge bureaucratic, expensive process that involves staff time and money. But of course, if somebody's not happy with the outcome, they need to have a right of review. And I just want to say thanks to my colleague, Veronica Powell, because she doesn't get thanked very often. That is a pretty thankless task. And she does a fantastic job, quite often speaking to people in high levels of distress. And occasionally bringing them to my attention or to my chief exec's attention where the outcome of the review is not clear. So there's just a general feel here. I think I'd like to bring this, well, whether I bring it back here more, but just to reassure you a bit like the fireside. This is an area of public interest, and therefore, for me, something that Louise and I are spending more time looking at more regularly. It's absolutely imperative people have confidence in the service, and also not just the public, but the staff as well, and they have a good experience. So, something I take exceptionally seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of communicating and providing feedback and information, if you receive a complaint from a digital platform, do you go back on that digital platform, or is it one-to-one, telephone? What are the methods for responding?
It's going to really depend on the nature of the complaint and the nature of the team that's required to. Some complaints lead to investigations. You know, can get quite heavy quite quickly. Others, and this is the beauty of the triage team, if somebody can get a face-to-face or a telephone conversation and get to the nub of the matter quickly, then that's terrific, and that's exactly what they should do. My comment about feedback is far more around general incidents, not necessarily complaints, where I feel we could do better, use technology better to let people know what's going on with a case. You know, have we arrested somebody? Have we not? Is the case closed? What's happening next? What's the court date? All that sort of stuff. I think a lot of that could be automated, actually. But the personal human connection around complaints is particularly important.
Okay. I think it was good to see that there's a mention of ETAP there and the role that they have in all of this as well. So I think, again, that's reassuring to see that ETAP is still in that loop. Okay. Right. Any other questions on that point, colleagues? Item 7. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chairman. I think any number of complaints is a concern. The number that are obviously involved here are, in my view, quite significant. And obviously what plans are in place, in a sense, to try and drive it now downwards, although I do appreciate you don't know what the beef is from a member of the public, and it can be unexpected, and obviously in terms of the complaint being upheld may be very rare to the number that actually have been made. But there must be some conscious effort to actually think that we've got to get these numbers down. Could you answer that?
In my view, I'd like as few as possible. Where they're due to things like standards or concerns about officer behaviour, perhaps the way people have been treated, not only are those small numbers, but those are absolutely opportunities to get stuck in, do some training, occasionally suggest people go and do something else for a living. You know, you can't be in this job and not have empathy and professionalism and make good judgments over and over again. So that's part of managing a lot of people. There are 2,000 officers in the next few weeks in Staffordshire. A lot of them are young and new to some of these experiences. We do our best to protect them from false accusation, which I'm afraid happens. Body-worn video is very important in that situation. And I've got a volunteers group that look at body-worn video experience as well. I think in the case of outcomes, sometimes with the best will in the world, what you think is should be the outcome, and it's a no-brainer, actually it's not legal or there's no evidence or it can't happen. So there will always be people unhappy with the outcome of an investigation. For me, the complaints it's so important. Anyone that comes into my office, I see it. Not all of them do. Most of them go straight to the service and are dealt with. But I learn more from looking at complaints and talking to people who've made complaints about where the service can improve than almost anything else. So it's valuable. I guess the key here, how many incidents are we talking about? I think there's 6,999 incidents a month, could be. So we're talking 60, 70,000 emergencies. You know, the police get through a lot of incidents. If we're coming down to this number of complaints, it's actually not a very high percentage. And given that you're sometimes taking people's liberty, using powers, we're always going to have a percentage. I think it's... Tell you what, Councillor Cox, the question I would like to answer is how do we compare with similar places? I'm just going to go and ask that question.
Councillor Williams.
I think the Commissioner was expecting my next question. I was going to ask, it's useful to see the data, but it's not benchmarked data against most similar police forces. So there is a link that you can go into, but then you have to delve into lots of detail on lots of different service areas of where the complaints are coming in. I think it's more a comment than a question. I think it'd be useful in the annual report to see the benchmarking against most similar police forces and the national numbers. And I think it'd also be useful for the panel members to see some examples of where we've taken that learning about where complaints have been received in the past and how the force has then acted on those complaints. So I guess it's more of a comment than a question.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, anything to say?
Yeah, Chair, I completely agree with that, actually, and I like the second idea as well. Perhaps it's something we could work into the work programme interim next year, a benchmark and the nature of the intervention where staff have had extra training or been moved on or whatever. I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. I always get concerned when I hear someone say complaint. I always try and knock it back by saying, well, thank you for your constructive feedback. That's helpful, particularly in a restaurant. Right. Anything else on item 7? Okay. Item 8 is questions to the Commissioner. We've spent some time with a lot of questions, but Councillor Leeson, you have a question?
It's just a question about the firefighters' pension scheme. And I'd seen where retained firefighters, they're looking at them joining the scheme with retrospective effect. Do we know when the second options exercise is going to take place and when we'll get an update about that?
I'm delighted to say somebody who knows more about pensions than me is here. This is a minefield, but David...
So, thanks. It's a very good question, and I'll try and answer it as easy as I can. So the second options exercise is ongoing. It's already started. So just for everybody's information, so this is where a retained or an on-call firefighter is actually looking at buying the pension back to when their service started. So this could be going back to, for example, 1980, as long as that firefighter was still employed in the given dates, which was, I think, it's between April and July 2000. So the exercise is ongoing. A lot of work by the pensions team to actually identify everybody that's in scope. Everybody's been written to. We've got about 440 current and former firefighters that are in scope for this Matthews remedy, and we have until March 2025 to make sure that happens. So massive exercise, and just out of interest, quite a significant cost as well that's going to be picked up by the government. So we've certainly got a number of examples that we've run through where for example, the back pay alone is around about £70,000, for example. So we've got a number of firefighters and a significant cost to the public purse in remedying as part of this exercise.
Okay. Right, thank you. Item 9 on the agenda is a subject of a supplementary agenda item, the appointment of a co-opted member. We undertook a session of interviews, and the committee decided to offer the position to Rebecca Rendini. So the meeting has to approve that appointment as an independent co-optee to this panel. So I'd like to propose that we do that, please. Could we have a show of hands in support if you agree? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. She should be at our next meeting. Dates for future meetings, item 10 on the agenda. You will be aware that there were 2 meetings penciled in, one in a few weeks' time should we not have agreed the budget or the precept, and a meeting in April. Those 2 meetings are now cancelled. So the next meeting is scheduled for the 24th of June, 2024. Is that a morning meeting?
Yes.
And that'll be 10 a.m. And Mandy will notify you of a pre-meeting should that be necessary. At this point, we've completed the agenda, so I'll take Commissioner.
Chairman, just noting the date of the next meeting, that's after the election. Could I just say how grateful I am to you and your panel members over the last 3 years for scrutinising me in such a balanced way, offering support when it was needed, and it's been welcomed, but also the constructive challenge that I've had all the way through. And I do hope to see you again in June. Can't guarantee it.
Right. Well, we've noted what you said, Commissioner, and we'd like to thank you for your openness and transparency and the professionalism always demonstrated by your team. So thank you very much indeed. So I'll try again. At this point, we'll close the meeting. And thank you for thank everyone for their attendance. Thank you.